And Rick Tuttle and Vince Jones join me. Rick Tuttle is another member of our committee, and of course Vince Jones is our staff member. You have before you two items of correspondence. One is our letter from June 2nd, 2008, which I hope seems vaguely familiar to you. I'm not quite sure why that's on here. I hope it isn't that you haven't seen it before, because it's a little bit out of date. And then a letter, an update from June 2009. And actually, since you had that 2008 letter, I just wanted to walk you through and kind of give you a quick update on the items that we mentioned there, which is maybe a good way to summarize what's happened since then. First of all, our overall comment is that we are delighted with the progress that's happened with this bond issue. The city, I think, has been very proactive on this, despite the economy, despite the increase in costs and so forth, by the projects. All of the construction projects have been completed on time and within budget. That was our charge, was to make sure that they did, and they have been. And then I'll go over these 4 items that were in the June 2008 letter, and we'll talk about what's happened with them. Our one little note of caution, which was item number 1, was the fire department's renovation program. It's kind of amazing to us that the police department could finish all of their new projects and all their renovation projects, and that renovation projects within the fire department could not all be completed by the deadline. So there were 4 projects that were not completed. We thought in 2008 that if we pushed hard enough we could get them completed. They are now scheduled to be completed in about August of this year, so they didn't miss by much. The reason we think that they did not make it was that the fire department kept coming up with new priorities and they couldn't make a decision, and by the time they did, it was too late to do all the work. Item number 2 related to the police academy renovation. And the problem there has been issues. Who owned the property? LAPRAC owns part of the property. The city owns other parts of the property, and we can only use our construction money on projects that were directly on city property. So we had to do a deal with LAPRAC. That took a lot of time. And what's happened, I understand that is now, there's agreement in principle, and it's just a matter of working out some details in the language to get it signed, in which case they will be ready to move forward. Those projects were removed from phase 1, and because we have extra money, have gone now into a phase 2 development, which will include 2 projects at the police academy, the northeast station renovations, and the renovations of the old Rampart station. Then our item 3 related to the Northeast Police Station. At that time, a year ago, it was the idea to build a new station. That's been changed, and instead as a renovation, and I think that's helpful because we did not have enough money to build the whole station, and then that became another obligation to the city. Finally, and I'll let Mr. Tuttle talk about this just for a minute, one of the items that came up related to surveillance cameras, and as part of these projects, more and more surveillance cameras are coming into the city. We didn't have an opinion about that, other than we thought that is something that you as the city council ought to be aware of and ought to have a policy rather than just let this go forward. And I will turn that over to Mr. Tuttle for just a comment or 2 on that.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Chairman, to your stewardship of City Council. Congratulations on your recent election, and it's good to see you, and also to see my former colleagues who are also members of the committee, and the members of the staff with whom I'm acquainted. It's good to be back. Good to be here. Mr. Chairman, I should point out my chairman, John Greenwood, used the term "we" several times. We're a citizens oversight committee. We're part of the successful bond issue, which barely passed, 67% some years ago. We meet approximately quarterly. There's also an administrative oversight committee which brings together the chief of police, the fire chief, the chief legislative analyst, and the city administrative officer, and that's the driving force administratively. They tend to meet once a month. Oh, and Councilman Zine, good to see you also. The driving force which provides leadership for the city in this effort. Then, of course, the departments themselves are represented generally at a high level. I associate myself with the tone and, in a sense, in the substance of Chairman Greenwood's report, I do, as he indicated, I did want to open the door for a bit more discussion, not necessarily here today, but I pray the council will consider the following. These new stations are a platform that provide for increased surveillance cameras. I'm told we're already over 100. We have some at MacArthur Park. We have some in the harbor. We probably have some others since we last focused on this. And the department, as you know, discusses this with the mayor's office. They also go and meet with individual council offices and so on. It just seemed to us, and I raised this issue, and it's very ancillary to our work. We just happened to hear about it, but thought in the spirit of focusing on something we thought was important and somewhat related to these construction projects, bring it to your attention, that this really does cry out for given this capability, it really does cry out for a citywide policy. We're a democracy, for heaven's sakes. This ought to be debated by the council, by the 15, back and forth, mayor get involved, and so on and so forth. Not left to the police department and the individual council office. If we're not careful, if it happens incrementally that way, we're going to wake up someday and have 1,000 cameras in this city, 2,000 cameras. Now, we can argue the balance between privacy and freedom and security. That's a healthy debate. But in our view, that ought to be a policy issue, and there ought to be a set of policies so the department can move forward with an overall, and council offices and the bureaucracy, the administration can move forward with an overall sense of what is policy. Or someday there will be something which will happen, which everyone will agree is an embarrassment. Someone's privacy, someone's going to get very embarrassed by some set of things which happen, and then we'll all say to ourselves, either north or south of a lawsuit, why didn't we have a policy? So we're ahead of it as far as I can tell. We should give that some consideration. Now, the department, I'd be interested in their view of it and so on, but it did strike us as something which is worth bringing to your attention. We are, I'll turn back over to John Greenwood and perhaps to Mr. Jones, and I may be back for further comments. Thank you.
A couple of other comments that are in our letter. We pushed from the beginning to really do our job for an audit. It turns out there's no money for an audit, and the city's office did not have, city controller did not have money for that. Eventually we found some money. We did do an audit. There were some minor things that came up in the audit, as in every audit, but we would recommend in future bond issues that an audit that money be set aside for an audit to make sure that we are doing our responsibility to the taxpayers. And the final issue that we looked at some was the involvement of youth at risk in city-financed construction projects. There's a big project that does this. It was, I would say, disappointing when you really get into the reality, what happens. It sounds all good in theory. When you get down to it, a few kids were hired, but really nothing to the extent of what we'd all like to toot our horns about. So maybe in summary, I would say that I think you guys can be very proud of the Prop Q committee and the work that they've done, the work that the staff has done, and I think that we have a record here which we would be able to take to the taxpayers and say we did a good job here. When the next one comes around, you can put some faith that we'll be able to do it again.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions. One, how much money is left over from phase one?
About 80.
Yes, good morning. My name is Vince Jones. I'm with the Bureau of Engineering. I'm the program manager for the Proposition Q bond program. And we currently have about $80 million in program contingency. So part of that is from interest earnings in the program. And I don't have the exact breakdown, but the other part is from program savings and how we manage the programs for each project. So.
And that money is going to be used for those 4 projects that I outlined, the 2 projects at the Police Academy and the Northeast Station and the old Ramparts. And it will still be a little bit of money left over if we can be within budget on these. The other little piece of news, we were all expecting to go home and quit, and the city attorney has opinioned that we need to continue until the second phase is gone as well. So we'll be back.
Did they tell you about Phase 3 yet?
No.
We're outlasting you all, even with 12 years term. And by the way, I live over in Culver City right now. I'm over there. I've raised the question as to whether I should continue to serve. This is not a commission, it's a committee, but I hereby stipulate to that right now, and might be good. Well, we just keep on going. I mean, let me go back to Mr. Jones, though. He may have additional comments to make.
No.
I was involved when they did the harbor station, when they had the ceremony for it, and the police chief was there, and I kidded the police chief that even he has term limits, but we have no term limits on this whatsoever.
Now, I have another question. Our current budget situation, how does that impact hiring folks involved in the second phase?
You want to comment on that?
Sure. Since the Prop Q bond program is, the funds are specifically for Proposition Q projects, we're not able to use it for anything other than what was passed under the ballot measure. The program in general is not impacted, or we don't impact the general fund for staffing. We're able to continue our projects with the teams that we have. So our impact is probably minimal as far as the general fund is concerned, because of the way that the program structure has been established, and the, what we can use the funds for and what we can't use them for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This police academy job is not yet done, and there's other work to do as well. There's also additional fire work to do, fire department work to do. We've been urging, our committee, the Citizens Committee, is urging the departments, relevant departments, and the city, let's keep an eye on this. Let's be successful. In the track and field term, let's run through the tape on this. Let's not ease up. Let's get this thing done and done well. If we do not want to have the city embarrassed and have the taxpayers lose out, if there's not the proper management review and oversight, even at the end, this is not the time to relax and say the job is done. The job is not done yet. Thanks to the savings and so on, we have some additional work we're doing. And for reasons which had to do with the litigation, the police academy has been put over and is going forward now. But let me give an example. Of all places, we don't want to have the city embarrassed at the police academy. That's a place which is an iconic part of the city. It's a part of the city that people know about, care about. Some of our most devoted public servants regard that as their campus. And we want to have a well-done job. What worries me a little bit, I'm going to wait. What worries me a little bit would be if the management were to think, well, we can relax and move this down to a third or fourth level of concern. That's a bad idea. Let's finish, let me stay on the police academy. Let's be sure this is done in the same first-rate way it appears to have been done with the rest of this project. We're in good shape, but let's finish this and finish it strong.
Thank you. Other council members? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just two quick ones. What remains at the academy? It's the shooting ranges, as I recall, and...
Yes, there's a specific scope of work that we've identified at the police academy. We are looking to renovate or do some renovation work on the administration building and cafe. So we're going to upgrade the facility, the building, make the restrooms ADA compliant, remove any hazardous materials that are in the building, replace the air conditioning system, do some structural improvements to the roof, things like that. So it's the administration building and the cafe, and then the shooting range. We're going to take out the shooting range and put in a state-of-the-art, system that will reduce the maintenance costs that the LAPD has to deal with on a regular basis and make it more efficient.
And that's preserving the historic part of the range, which was from the 1932 Olympics, right?
Absolutely.
So maintaining that?
That's part of it, yes. And then the other part of the police academy project that we're doing is we're planning to build and design a new training building, a new training facility that's going to be 15 to 20,000 square feet to replace the existing training facility that they have now, which are trailers.
Yeah. put there in 1960-something, as I recall.
Yes.
Jack Webb Buildings, yeah.
And the Jaguar building, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Tuttle, you had a
Yes, I want to come back also to this matter of something Mr. Greenwood mentioned and the committee's been concerned about and disappointed with, and that is the involvement of young people, sometimes called at-risk youth and so on and so forth. We've got $80 million still on the table. We can do some things for that. And whatever the vocabulary is of it, the names of these programs and so on, you can't kid me. I've grown up too, and I know one of the best things for a young person is a good job, where they learn some skills, learn a trade, and so on. And we ought to be, there should have been a better job done in this area, and everything possible should be done to try to get the contractors to bring in some of these young people in this remaining $80 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of work and potentially some work for some of these young people.
And the last thing, and Mr. Jones heard this last week, I was in Budget and Finance Committee on some of these elements. And I want you guys to hear, because even if you're not on that committee next time, we know we're going forward in a few years with another bond. We have to, because there's fire facilities, police have to, that weren't on the list. So that being said, one thing I think we really failed at this year, and you mentioned the fire department, I had a situation with Fire 87, which is in my district, was upgraded from a very small two-engine company, I think it was, to a full regional station. And they had not planned for the training element that was going to go in there. And so we had a big fight with the fire department over whether they were going to put in fire hydrants to train on. And if you want to make a training facility and firemen are there and they don't have fire hydrants because it wasn't in the bond, we had this huge, big debate back and forth. And finally said, the heck with it, forget it, they'll train without fire hydrants. And so there's no fire hydrants in the back of the station where they train the firefighters, which is kind of dumb. Also and Mr. Zion know very well the situation at Topanga, where we had a street in front of the facility that looked like the worst alley in the city of LA. It had huge potholes. It was 50 years since it had been repaired. It was a disgrace. The sidewalks were broken, and there was no money in the bond to do those kind of things. And then what we're really finding now is that now Topanga and Olympic stations are not going to get their lawns mowed and the weeds pulled and the landscaping done because the Rec and Parks Department says, that's not in our program for the year. You're not paying us to do that. We're standing pat with what we do in the other stations, but adding nothing new. So they have a requirement, they have to have funding for any new facilities, and it was never included in any of the plans of the police department or the bonds. So now we put in all this landscaping, it's dying, and a problem. So I think we just need really to be very clear in our vision of what we want to build in the future and include all those things. Firefighters and cops are great at doing what they do. They're not particularly good at building buildings. So I think we have to look at that vision. I know you guys will be involved somehow in the future in this, whether you're on that committee or not. You'll be the kind of folks we go to for that leadership. So I just want you to keep that in mind. We need a much greater vision, and when we build these things, of what we're exactly doing, and then build to that and all around it as well. We just spent, Bernard, how much we spent across the street to put in a computer room in police headquarters because they forgot to do that.
About 10 million.
10 million, and then 22 million for a new building because they forgot to schedule SID people to transfer over to the new building, and we got no place to put them. So we're buying a new building for SID. We just didn't think some of these things through very clearly. I think we need to be very careful next time, so in our minds.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue at the academy, there's 3 ranges. Are they going to upgrade all 3 of them?
Yes.
Okay. And the issue that was brought up about the computer facility change orders, you notice a lot of change orders going through with the savings?
We're not really in the position to do that. That's the Administrative Oversight Committee that's doing the details of it. You may know.
Sure.
Because change orders have been a continuing problem in the city where people bid low and they make change orders and then it skyrockets on the final cost. But since you've got a savings, maybe someone's monitoring that.
Yeah, part of the reason that we have savings in the program is because of the way we've managed our projects. And I can tell you, we have 13 projects in our program. 2 of them are a group of police renovations and a group of fire renovations. We have 11 projects, and of all of those 11 projects, we all delivered them with less than 10% change order. So that's within budget. We go into every project with a 10% contingency for change orders, and all of our projects were delivered with less than 10% change orders. On average, I would say our projects, we came in at probably about 6% change orders for the entire program, which I think is really outstanding, the way that we've delivered them. So change orders are something that we were very cognizant of, and I think we did a good job on it. And the reason that we did a good job is because during design, part of the process during the design was to do constructability review at every major phase of the design. So at the end of the early stages, which we call schematic design, we did a constructability review where we had an independent third party look at the drawings and the plans to make sure they made sense. And then at the end of the job, at the end of the design, we did another independent study where we looked at all of the construction documents, the specifications, again, to make sure that they were constructible. So we think that that constructability review that we did on every project really helped us to identify some of the issues that we might encounter during construction, and I think that contributed a lot to our low change order success in the program.
That's commendable, because in the past, it hasn't always been that way. And for our former controller, as audits are taking place and they review, and one thing that's always stood out in the past is a change order will take a whole project into another stratosphere. So congratulations on a good job. And that's how we end up saving money and getting more projects. We
Yes.
talk about on time and in budget, which is excellent.
Yeah, this team, Mr. Jones, excuse me.
Sidebars.
Yeah, Mr. Samsonaka and Mr. Jones, in one after the other, Mr. Jones, now, both in our judgment, I think the chair would agree, just done a fine job managing this project, getting it done, being careful stewards of the public's money, taxpayers' money, that's what we're talking about. And all the way along, back to Councilman Smith's question, we constantly, as we saw this program was being well managed, we saw minimal change orders, we saw it coming in ahead of budget and so on, we began to stress the point in the last few years, it's been a number of years, as we began to come into the home stretch of this first phase. We have another phase. We still have 80 million out there. I don't want to forget this. Let's go for the win. Let's go for something so we can proudly go back to the taxpayers someday, sooner than later, because there'll be other needs. And both these individuals and their teams have done a fine job, and in my judgment, the departments have done a fine job. I raised hell for a while, there's no secret about this publicly, about the fact the person of the police chief was not present as often as I would like at the Administrative Oversight Committee. But on the other hand, the project has come in well. He did have senior representation. Chief Papa and others were present as well. Fire chiefs were generally present, and the person of the CLA and the CAO were also present. It was an old controller's recommendation from the old days to bring together an Administrative Oversight Committee, not this committee particularly, but the other one I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, because we found that in the old days, before this committee existed, the department itself didn't have the muscle to move the city, the Public Works. It just didn't have it. To expedite something through council committees, to do new hiring, to make the kind of adjustments that are needed, and this group did. It's very important in future projects, since we're talking about building and maintaining institutional memory, that the most senior level people be present. The word gets around, the chief is there, the department head's there, the person of the CLA, the person of the CL. We'll settle for a deputy mayor. We won't expect the elected official, But that model and that design, I think, has served us pretty well with the libraries, and now with this. It's very important because they do meet regularly, and as passing on institutional memory, we don't want that to slip away, where we begin to get third and very nice people, but third and fourth level people attending these meetings. Then you just don't get that kind of drive and attention out of the departments. This has been a very fine job, and my congratulations to Mr. Jones and Mr. Tanaka.
And as a former controller, you know how to control.
He's been very helpful on the committee.
You got that whip.
Councilmember Parks, do you have any questions?
Yeah, let me cut a couple of things. One thing, and let me ask the chair, on the issue dealing with the surveillance cameras, that seems like it'd be something that we'd want to refer to ITGS as they deal with ITA and other things, that we could come up with a policy dealing with future use of the surveillance cameras and a policy. And so that may help in that regard, because they are on the move and increasing, and soon the newer stations will be overloaded. The older stations, I don't think in many instances have the capability to absorb, so it could go, that resource could go by the wayside quickly. The other issue is that on your point on at-risk youth and hiring, one thing I would recommend that on your, as you go forward on the remaining parts of the projects, if you look at the recently adopted city ordinance on CRA local hire and a current policy being developed for other city construction on local hire, it may not touch exactly on at-risk youth, but it would certainly go a long way in hiring people from the community where the project is being designed and put forth. The other thing, just as a recommendation, you used the term that after the design, you bring in what is, you look at whether it can be constructed. One of the things that, having said on the MTA board and the Expo line, they use something they call design build that somewhat takes this two-part phase into one, as opposed to what we've seen in the past where we get an RFP for design and then we go out for an RFP for construction, and often the construction can't build the design. And so merging those, and we have a request that's currently at the Public Works Committee, our Public Works Commission that will be coming to Public Works Committee, talking about what the benefits and advantages of design build as a concept. And then my final thing is that one of the things, and we're pleased to see that this plan has been managed well, like the libraries, but we also just throw in one request as you look towards the phase 2 down the line. Currently, USC is looking to invest about $500 million north of the campus on between Hoover and McClintock and north of Jefferson. There's a fire station there that they would not like to build around, but yet there's no money to replace it. It may be an ideal opportunity to go into a joint effort with USC to not only see if you can get shared funding to move that station, place it on Vermont. It's not that they don't want the station close to the university. They just would not like to build a $500 million development with housing and commercial around a fire station. And so if there's some way to get with them, and we've given that information to the fire department, but the dilemma is they don't want to foot the whole bill, and if the city has no money, then they end up building around the fire station. So if there's any way to look at that as maybe a joint effort to move that station from Jefferson and Hoover over on Vermont, there's more than sufficient number of places to look at. But the key is how might you go into a joint funding mechanism to get that station moved and funded with the help of SC.
Look into that. Thank you.
Mr. Tuttle?
Mr. Chairman, I'm constrained to ask this question. What is ITTS?
ITGS, that's a committee on the department, on this council that deals with the technology, and it's basically the city's landlord. So that's
It's a committee of the council?
that's right.
That's fine.
Councilman Cardenas is the chair.
Right, fine. I just want to be sure we're staying in the council arena and these acronyms and initials change sometimes.
Information Technology General Services.
Yeah.
Of course, I threw it out there just to confuse you anyway, so.
It worked. One thing I learned a long time ago, if I don't know, I ask.
But it's where the council would rely on a policy to be developed.
It's good to see you again. Thank you.
We also have one speaker in the audience, Monica Harmon.
We done.
Any more questions for the panel, Mr. Chair?
Good morning.
I think so.
I'm here to speak on behalf of the Community Action Team, which is an organization I started in Boyle Heights that represents various organizations, Boyle Heights Historic Society, homeowners, Boyle Heights Neighbors Organization. We fought to stop the old mural at the Hollenbeck Station. It cost $195,000. The artist was anti-LAPD. If you look on his website, that's all his art is comprised of. And after fighting, going to City Council, Councilman Weezer finally stepped in and said, the mural is not going up. Cultural Affairs stated to us that that money could be replaced if they could find it. And after what I heard here this morning, it would be great to replenish that $195,000, which was taxpayer dollars that just basically was wasted away on a mural that did not get final approval from the community. We've been to Prop Q meetings, we've been to cultural fair meetings, giving our, our ideas. I think cameras are a great investment in the community. Neighborhood councils, friends from the Valley, North Hollywood, Hollywood, and the Valley have donated money for cameras, so putting them and using some of the Prop Q money is a great idea. Here's the article. We got great publicity when we fought the mural in the LA Times. It was all over the website throughout the world. This Hollenbeck negative for LAPD, derogatory for Latinos. So we would really appreciate you consider giving some of the money, $195,000, to hire a local artist with community input and support, officers' input as well, because this is going to be the only new police station without a mural. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you may want to meet with someone from the Citizens Oversight Committee and see if that can be addressed somehow.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Did they actually do the mural?
Yes.
They did the mural.
Completed.
So it's done. So the $195,000 was paid for the mural.
Yes.
There's a screening committee that reviews what the arts fee goes for?
Yes, just a little history. What happened was during design, there was a committee that was organized by the Cultural Affairs Department to select an artist. On that committee were LAPD, the Bureau of Engineering was represented, local community members were on a committee that ultimately selected the artist. And then during the artist's conceptual design, there were some reviews. Ultimately, in the end, the images that were part of the mural were found to be unacceptable to the community. So the mural did not get installed at the police station. It was built, it didn't get installed. It will not be installed at the Hollenbeck Police Station. So that's the current status.
The $195,000 paid for a mural that is sitting where?
As my understanding that the Cultural Affairs Department is in negotiations with the artist to get the mural. So I'm not directly involved because that's Cultural Affairs Department. It's my understanding that they're in negotiations to get the mural back, and I don't know if they have any plans for it.
So somehow we need to make sure we have proper oversight when it comes to the arts fees and what they do with those fees as far as the mural or some kind of whatever they do. And if this had LAPD representation, other representation, and it fell through, then there's something wrong with the system somewhere.
Well, yeah. I mean, LAPD could speak more on that, but again, I think it was just the process and maybe some lessons learned from the process to, make sure that it's done a little differently. But
I mean, I can't see giving $195,000 back if the project's done, but what do you do for the arts fee for the station?
I'm Tom Brennan. I'm the commanding officer of facilities management for LAPD. The issue with the mural at Hollenbeck, the city is taking possession of it. The entire amount of the $195 that was set aside was not expended. Cultural Affairs has finished their negotiations with the artists to finish compensating the artists for the work that was done. They're going to take possession of the mural. We are working right now with Cultural Affairs to put together a funding package to go back out to solicit additional artists. We've had run-ins with art installations at a couple of stations. Prior to actually doing any work at the Rampart station, the artist backed out of that project. So we're actually going out and soliciting for an artist to do a public art piece at Rampart. We'll be doing one at Hollenbeck. We have completely changed how we select the artists, the department's involvement, the community's involvement, because we do not ever want to be in this situation again.
Maybe we should have them bonded so we don't find a similar situation again. It sounds like there's a process, or there was a process, and there were some problems, and then the station doesn't have what the city has as the arts fee requirement, in this particular case, the mural. I've seen, for example, West Valley, they have some beautiful old antique police equipment, vehicles on the photos and the glass windows, et cetera. So,
And I think if you
Topanga-
look at the West Valley Station, if you look at the Topanga Station, I think absolutely we have found where public art is amazing and integrated into the facility itself.
Well
And that's
received.
where we're hoping to continue to do. And the way that we've met with Cultural Affairs and have redesigned this position so that there is a consistent oversight of that piece.
Okay.
Let me also mention, though, that with the Holland Lake Police Station, I was also the project manager on that station, so I know that station very well. As part of the design, the old Holland Lake Police Station that was at the same site there on First and between St. Louis and Chicago, that station was demolished, but before it was demolished, there was a mural that was a part of that building. We took that mural out and saved it and preserved it, and we reinstalled it in the new Hollenbeck Police Station. So this was a mural that was done by Joseph Young, was the artist. It was built and installed in 1964, and that mural is about 6 feet tall and it's about 30 feet long. And we installed it in the community room in the Hollenbeck Police Station, and I think it looks great, and I think the community is going to love it. Because it is a part of history and that we preserved. It's in the new station to last for the next, 50 to 75 years. So we do have a piece of art in the building, and I think just the building, if you haven't seen it, the building in general is kind of like a piece of art because of the way it looks. So we do have some art components that are a part of the building.
Any other questions from council members? If not, I guess the appropriate motion would be to note and file the reports on items 1 and 2. Does someone like to move that item?
So moved, and thank the committee, and thank them for re-upping Phase 3.
Yeah, they volunteered, even the Culver City people. Thank you, Culver City.
Well, thank you for being here. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you. Is there a second? I'll second it.
I second.
Okay, we can have a roll call? No. How do you do?
This is simpler than the state.
Okay.
If no one's opposed,
No one's opposed, it's just, okay.
We do it real simple, Mr. Chair.
we assume.
We don't fill it.
Item 3, Board of Police Commissioners and CA reports relative to a donation of 2 Milo Range Pro Force option simulators valued at $120,990 from the Los Angeles Police Foundation for use by the Police Department's Olympic and Topanga areas.
Good morning, Jason Kleen, Office of the CAO. The Police Department is requesting approval to accept the donation of 2 Milo Range Pro Force option simulators from the Los Angeles Police Foundation for the Olympic and Topanga area stations. The donation consists of equipment and software that will allow officers to engage in incident management scenarios in a virtual reality environment. The donation is valued at approximately $121,000, and these simulators are currently in use at the department's other area stations. Acceptance of this donation will have no impact on the general fund and does not commit the city to any long-term agreements or funding.
Good morning, Sandy Jo MacArthur, the Police Department.
Peter DiCarlo from the Police Department.
Questions from council members?
I just have a question regarding the appreciation extended for $129,990. How do we express our appreciation of this company for this donation? We give them a gold badge or something?
The Police Commission usually sends out a letter to the donors thanking them for the donations, whatever they might be.
Maybe the council could do something too. That's a significant contribution with no strings attached, almost $121,000.
And I think they've done this for some other stations as well. So that certainly would be in order if...
The $120,000 is for the 2 stations, the 2 new stations that recently came up online.
I think that it would be appropriate for the council. We acknowledge businesses for different activities. I mean, I've seen donations and contributions, but this is a significant amount of money for them to donate for the services of the police officers. And I understand Mr. Smith has utilized the equipment.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. However, it's the Police Foundation, so I don't think we should give them a badge certificate or anything, because they got them.
Well, no, I'm not talking about the Police Foundation. Did the Police Foundation pay for it?
Yes, they did.
Oh, they paid for it. Okay, I thought this company
not-
donated
no.
it, so the foundation paid for it.
The foundation paid for them.
All right, okay. Then I'll withdraw my... That's what they're in business for.
That's what they're supposed to do.
As Mr. Parks knows, they generate dollars, and then they purchase police equipment. Didn't you discover or bring that about, police
In
foundation?
my prior life, yes.
Other questions?
Founding father.
Councilmember Parks?
Let me just ask, and I think we appreciate what the foundation's done, and we also appreciate that they followed the guidelines. One of the things on prior donations and other foundations, we found we got a little skittish out there where there's a fine line between donating the equipment, which we can accept, or giving the money. And when it gives the money, it requires the department to go through all of our city functions. And in fact, we have a motion that's in one of our committees talking about the set guidelines so everybody's clearly aware in the future. The one thing that in this committee, there's about 7 or 8 of these foundation donations that have never been cleared by this committee or the council. And the dilemma we'll run into at some point, if you're using the equipment and it breaks down, you have an expectation it's in your inventory, and the council has never approved them. So we'd ask that we might get those 7 or 8, because they went all the way to council. Council sent them back for additional information, and they never came back. So it puts all of us in a bind. If we don't accept it, they're using it, and later on, they break and they say, can you replace it? And we say, we never accepted it. So if we can get those moved back to council, I think it would help all of us.
That would be wonderful, thank you.
I think it's like a year and a half ago.
We'll work with whoever we need to work with.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, if there's a motion to approve the donation?
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4, Police Department report relative to its anti-piracy unit, arrests made, materials confiscated, number of investigations performed, future plans, and how additional resources could be deployed pursuant to motion Gruel, Perry, Garcetti.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. Captain Ann Young, Commanding Officer of Detective Support and Vice Division. With me is Lieutenant Rick Shields, who is the officer in charge of the piracy unit that's within DSVD. We've prepared a document, I believe you have that before you, that recaps our total statistics since the implementation of the unit going back to 2004, which you should have before you. And it goes to current July 1st, 2009. And the total stats for the unit's effort, 5 detectives, 1 police officer that currently staffs that unit. Since 2004, the unit has actually recovered $61,974,000 and change worth of contraband in the city. Since 2004, they've made 352 arrests and served 126 search warrants. For 2009, our current search warrants that have served are 14. We have 25 arrests, and we're at about $12 million in property that we've actually recovered so far. Lieutenant Shields does the day-to-day operation as far as deploying the detectives and police officer, mostly in the downtown, I would say, community. So, Rick, if you have to add.
Good morning, Board. Basically, we really hit the Santee Alley, which is one of the #1 priorities for us. But that is mushroomed out so much to the other areas that Maple, Wall, San Pedro Streets has really encompassed a lot of this area. But we also work citywide with the area vice units. Most of the time, the area vice units do the street sales, and my unit kind of targets the more high level, because we do the search warrants, which takes considerably more amount of time to produce and work and do the undercover buys and everything. So I hope that answers your question on that.
Any questions from members?
Court and filings, convictions, how does it follow up after you make your seizures? the arrest, how the courts view these particular cases? We're getting filings, we're getting convictions, people going to jail, or are they getting a slap on the wrist and back in business tomorrow?
All the above, actually, sir. It is a felony. If you have 100 or more CDs or DVDs, we prosecute that as a felony. Our arrest, almost all our arrests are felony. We do our own filing. We run the course all the way through to the district attorney. But normally, to be honest with you, most of them are put on probation. It is a $25,000 bail to get out, which is pretty stiff.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come up with it, sometimes they don't. But as a general rule, we get a filing on it. They put them on probation for like 3 years, and we get a lot of people that do this again, and then they really kind of slap them a little hard and they'll put them in jail. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the second offense, they're a little more concerned?
A little more bite into it. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions from council members?
Just a quick question. You have 5 detectives, 1 police officer, 3 or whatever. Looking at the amount of arrests you've made and warrants you've served and everything, is that a sufficient number? You're doing a lot of work with a few people. And the reason I ask that is that one of the officers I talked to some time ago that was in this unit said an awful lot of this is being done by organized crime now, that they're moving away in many respects from drugs into this because the slap on the wrist is much easier than the jail time they're going to do if they're marketing drugs. So do you see that this is a lot of organized crime that's behind this, and you're not able to go to that level? Do you need more resources or work closer with the organized crime unit in some of this? Just your point of view.
I'm not so sure if it's organized crime, but what we have seen is an increase in selling dope, narcotics. The gangs have taken over some of the CDs and DVDs because of the penalty. It's not as severe as narcotics. You're absolutely right.
And the money's good.
And the money's pretty good.
Yeah.
The money's pretty good. They can set up a street-level person, can park a car. They'll have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, what we call counterfeit or pirated CDs or DVDs. They'll pull them out on the street, start selling them for $5. They probably make those for probably 50 cents to $1. So they're making pretty good profit on that. Margin of profit is pretty good. The gangs have gone into business and part of that, and we're trying to see and develop that as best we can.
Yeah. So if you find that there's gang involvement, what really can you do?
Well, one way we turn it over to the GET team, Gang Enforcement Detail. We'll work closely with the area unit, advise them what's going on. We'll try to really target a search warrant at that location. We'll do an abatement, possibly on the location if they're in front of a storefront. So we also tackle it at a secondary, putting an abatement on the location. We also advise the owner, the landlord, and the tenant.
But all you can really do is still file a felony arrest and go after confiscation of the stuff. You don't get the jail time you get out of drugs. So do we need to strengthen the laws then? Would that be a recommendation?
It could.
Well, if you could, yes, that would certainly help.
Okay. If you have some recommendations on it, why don't you talk to us or the new chairman here has some experience in Sacramento, and maybe we could put in our portfolio for legislation next year, strengthening of the laws if there's a connection to organized crime, that you can then go after them at a higher level of a felony as far as jail time goes. So if you have any ideas, bring it to us. We'll see what we can do, okay?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker from the public, Melissa Patak, with the MPAA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you to LAPD for its work in this area. We know they're understaffed, and we partner with them extensively on these kinds of investigations. So we welcome this report. It does point out the need for more resources, which we know it's a very tough time to ask for that. Your point about the gangs is something that we know makes this more serious as a gateway crime to bigger and worse and more dangerous offenses. We know that there have been our investigators have suffered injuries. We know there's been off-duty LAPD officers working private security who've been suffered injuries as a result of counterfeiting investigations. So it is getting to be, more serious that people are at risk from this kind of crime. The other point I would make is I know City Council recently passed a nuisance abatement ordinance which will allow abatement of properties which are being used for counterfeiting. And I would hope that LAPD is working on a protocol for what the next steps are in implementing that ordinance, because the property owners are letting this happen. Whether it's Santee Alley or other places in the Fashion District, they derive income from renting out the space in front of the stalls. This new ordinance will allow the city attorney to abate those properties, which we think will also be another kind of tool in the toolbox here to try to get at this crime.
Now, Ms. Patak, I don't know if you sent something to us with a lot of good questions and a lot of good ideas. Have you ever met with the LAPD on this issue?
Yes. My colleagues, Mike Robinson, Kevin Suh, are in regular contact with LAPD, yes.
Great.
Sir, we work very closely with MPA, Motion Picture Associated of America, and RIA, Recording Industry Associated of America. We work with their private investigators. We know all their executives, and we do a lot of work with them hand in hand. They're very close and a very good relationship.
Right. The issues are resources. I mean, the LAPD doesn't have the resources to give us a sort of a street-level task force that would, address the people who are selling the stuff in a restaurant, come in with a little briefcase in a restaurant and offer patrons a $5 DVD or CD, or the people spreading it out on blankets. They are working on the more high level, the distributors and that kind of thing. We need both. We really need both approaches. So we know it's a resource issue.
And it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, like the underground economy. The resources obviously come back to us in terms of tax revenue if we do it right.
Right. And there is federally, and this may be a place for City Council to assist, there's last year Congress passed what's called the Pro-IP Act, and now it's going through the appropriation process, and the House put in $20 million for state and local law enforcement grants. And to the extent LA could help support on the Senate side and in conference, because LA could apply for those grants, and that would bring some federal resources. So we would hope that there could be a partnership in petitioning our federal officials for these, to make sure the grant money is put in the legislation, and then hopefully we would succeed in applying for it.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good idea. Any other questions or comments from council members?
Just the sales tax we lose, $61 million is a lot of sales tax that will go into the general fund to help our depleted budget. Okay.
Will we notify them?
Yes. If
move that matter.
we have a motion and a second.
Second.
Great.
Item 5, motion Perry Parks, requesting the city attorney prepare an ordinance to require businesses to keep products containing concentrations of hydrofluoric acid sufficient to be used for tagging, graffiti, and/or vandalism property behind the counter or in a locked case, and would additionally prohibit minors from being able to purchase these products.
I think there's another motion on that, too.
Number 6.
John, there's another motion on that.
Also 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, item 6.
Also item 6, motion Zion Smith Garcetti requesting the CLA, Police Department, and City Attorney report relative to outlawing the sale of spray paint cans to minors in the city of Los Angeles.
My understanding, these were going to be directions to city attorney and staff to report back.
We have city attorney staff in the back. I don't know why they're being so shy.
We saw that it was on the agenda.
It is.
Bruce Reardon from the City Attorney's Office, Peter Schutan as well. We saw that this was on the agenda, so we thought it might make sense to attend in case you had any questions for us.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, they got our LAPD protector, Harry Edo, presenting. I see that on the note.
Yes, please.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have much to present. Like I indicated, it was my understanding these would be instructions to the city attorney and other staff to report back on these items. And certainly, we're supportive of working with the other entities to come back with a report to the committee.
And item number 6, is there already state or local law on spray cans, and what is that currently?
There's a variety of legislation. Councilmember Zine and Mr. Shatan and I have discussed this both in council and outside of council in the last month or two, because graffiti's been on all of our minds for the last several months in particular. And I think it was about a month ago when Councilmember Zine indicated that he would be pursuing this, among other things, with regard to graffiti. And at this point, I think our next step is to prepare a report, to work with LAPD, to prepare a report that summarizes all of the various possibilities. I know that federally law was looked into. I know various states, and I even know that I believe in Great Britain, or at least in Wales, steps have been taken to limit the sales of of spray paint. I'm talking specifically about number 6. Number 5, I think, is a little bit more of an environmental hazard issue, but we'll also make sure that the new city attorney has this on his mind. But number 6 is really related directly to, is my understanding from Councilmember Zine, is related directly to, young people are buying this spray paint for only one reason, which is to go out and graffiti our walls. I mean, just today driving in, I noticed on my normal route up the Harbor Freeway, someone, and it has to have been 1 or 2 or 3 people, had spray painted 30 or 40 pillars in a row with the same symbol, which I'm sure was a symbol that identifies one individual or one group. And this went on for hundreds and hundreds of yards. It must have been quite a project, and it was terrible to see because it wasn't there last week. The point being, this is a really serious problem, and we want to make every effort we can within the law to help the city council deal with it. I think for Peter, who's with me, has a long history of working on anti-graffiti projects going back many years with the city council, with LAPD, and with the district attorney's office. So that's why although technically this isn't necessarily, our feeling was to be here today because we want to pick up the ball on this immediately, get it to our new bosses, raise the issue. I know they have a lot on their minds, but this is important, and to get a report as quickly as possible.
Now, is there not current city law on this subject? Because I recall that there was years ago, but I may be wrong.
Councilman, I believe that the city law relates to the requiring anyone who's selling it has to keep it separated and enclosed in order for it to be accessed. In other words, a clerk has to access the spray cans and things like that. It can't be accessed to the general public in the store. And that was a result of local and I think actually state legislation eventually, but we need to follow up for you and get you some information on that.
And if I may add on that, it's actually Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Zine, and I'm sure this will be the case with you as well, have made this a priority. What we found, I hope this to be brief, but I think this will be helpful. I hope it is. What we found, and Councilmember Zine and I were just talking about this last week, when Councilmember Parks and Councilmember Zine raised the issue of how to handle civil and administrative costs, for example, about a year or more ago, what we found when we actually opened up the books and took a look was similar to the gun laws. There's a lot of ordinances on the books. There's some that have been started and never followed up on. Some parts of the state do one thing. You get the idea. What we took Councilmember Parks and Councilmember Zine's instructions to us as an opportunity, really, to dust off the books, rewrite the ordinance on that civil administrative approach. I think that's my sense of what the council member wants here, too, is, move quickly, as quickly as possible, but also to move more comprehensively and to put together an ordinance that updates the past so that we can use it now, but also I think what we've learned over the last couple of years in particular is to make sure that the ordinance is enforceable. We're the criminal side of the city attorney's office, Mr. Shatan and I, but we represent that side. And what works for us, and I think for the council, is to make sure that whatever we do, and ultimately report to you, is enforceable, that actually we can go out, and it's a perfect follow-up for what you're talking about with Santee Alley. It's the laws need, you were mentioning perhaps the law, and I know you well know this, but I think it's worth discussing very briefly. If the laws need to be updated, and we took notes on that because that was of great interest to us. We're from the gang division, so that was of great interest to us, what we just saw and heard. If the laws need to be updated in order to be fine-tuned and modified, we're all for that, and we thank you for including us, frankly, because I think we can offer you some advice as to how to make sure that the laws are enforceable.
I've got one other point on this. The current law requires spray paint and other etching materials to be secure locked, as Mr. Tan has said. There were some major retailers that weren't doing that. We went after them through the city attorney's office and got compliance. So I think most of them are now complying with that, where they must keep it locked and it has to be unlocked by a clerk. This would then take it to another level where you would have to be a certain age. The other thing I'd like to see included in this is possession of spray paint within that age category would be another violation.
It already is, under state law 6, that's 594.4, I think. It's one of the 594 sections that it's illegal for a minor to be in possession of a spray can.
So is anyone under 18?
In other words, if we can prove, we'd have to prove that it was intended to be used as a graffiti for purposes of graffiti.
Here's what they do, is they put it in a backpack, in a knapsack, and they walk around, they'll take it out, and then they spray it and they put it back. So there's been situations where they'll be on a street corner waiting. The police will come by, stop them, they have this backpack, they open it up, there's a spray paint, they're getting ready to go do a mission.
Right.
They could be 15, 16, 17 years of age. They haven't actually engaged in it, but they're preparing to do that. And obviously, we want to apprehend them before they tag the walls, whether it's the Harbor Freeway, the Ventura Freeway. Our city is looking like some lands in other parts of the world where the tourists see nothing but graffiti, and it doesn't give the image that we want to project from the City of the Angels. So if 594.4 currently applies mere possession, but then you're saying it has to have the intention.
We need to provide you with better information. We were here monitoring this, and yes, I believe that in order for it to be illegal, there needs to be a criminal intent that we'd have to prove.
It's difficult, if not impossible, for the officers to determine that. So what I'd like to see is mere possession within a certain age category would be a crime. And if we don't get serious on it, we're going to have more of the destruction, and we know it's millions of dollars, and people in the communities are getting more and more perturbed because it continually spreads throughout this region. So whatever we can do within the legal arena, if we want to take it past 18 to 21, or do we have to leave it at age 18? But there's a whole variety of folks, and when you talk about the tagging, they want to put their initials up so everyone will recognize who it is. They want that recognition, that credit. And we're also working on a computer base where we'll be able to collect that data, and once we apprehend the individual, go after them and their parents for the damages. But I'd like to see that made as tough as possible on the possession. Obviously, when they're doing it, we've got the $1,000 reward for people who turn them in. But leading up to that point, stores that sell need to be locked up. And I wouldn't be offended if it was 21 years of age or over in order to purchase it. Another component is you must show identification, as we do with certain drugs at the drugstore. They take down your information when you're purchasing not prescription medication, but other medication now requires you to show identification. We need to make it as tough as possible if we're going to get serious on the eradication of graffiti in the city of Los Angeles. Otherwise, it's cosmetic, it does no good, and the people continually look at us to say, what are you doing to fix this problem that is terrorizing neighborhoods? Whether it's a gang member or a tagging crew, it's offensive, and we need to put the laws in place, have enough deterrent so we can have some impact. Because the current laws, as we can see by driving down any freeway, current laws aren't working. They're absolutely being ignored, and the consequences aren't severe enough to have impact. I see other cities surrounding Los Angeles where you don't see graffiti. Whatever they're doing seems to work. And some cities don't have the requirement that it be locked up. I don't see graffiti, but I see it here when we have these requirements. So we need to stiffen it as much as possible, every legal way, to send the message out. It's not going to be acceptable. If you get caught, serious consequences.
Thank you, Councilmember, and if I may, two things to respond to that. One, Peter Schutan actually just leaned over to me and said he'd be happy to take the lead on making sure that report gets back to you, which is great news to me because I know Peter has a lengthy history and experience going back many years on fighting graffiti. So we have an expert here who's going to work with Jody Galvin and the other people we've already assigned in our office. And I think second part, what we've really learned over the last 2 years is by returning back to this committee and working with this committee, we can provide you with some options. Like we did with the graffiti ordinance that we did just a few months ago, that process then I think will refine it and help us all rather than, that's the best process. By being as transparent as possible with you all, we can then get your input as we go along. Several issues today, all related. The cameras that were talked about, although I know they were talked about in a separate area, the cameras and the privacy issues are not for me to discuss, but the cameras are very critical in catching graffiti because the point that Mr. Schutan made and you made is graffiti is one of the toughest crimes to prosecute for a variety of reasons, to include just catching somebody at 2 in the morning. Secondly, the Santee Alley information borders this because someone mentioned it's a gateway crime. The MPAA representative mentioned it's a gateway crime. We know graffiti is a gateway crime. If we can shut off these avenues into gangs, that would help us considerably. And then finally, would 60 days or something, well, I'll leave it with Peter. I mean, I would like about 60 days or so to report to you, but I'm not sure what you need.
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Peter, is that reasonable?
Oh, that's plenty of time, yeah.
Yeah, one question. Would a police officer who finds a juvenile in possession of a spray can, which is not criminal intent, have enough probable cause to ask for a verbal search warrant to go to the property and see if then they have the tools and the books which normally they keep in their homes?
Always tough to answer, and I know you asked it in that very spirit, and in hypothetical. My experience is very tough hypothetical, very tough to get through a judge, and I mean that in a respectful way.
That would be my...
I don't mean that in a criticism of our bench. It doesn't help any of us for me to criticize the bench. They have a really tough job in evaluating these search warrants as they come in on a daily basis. And that's you isolate what makes graffiti so difficult to prosecute successfully. But I have to say, that said, there are two things that help. One, the attention you bring to it, because you raise, it's too often considered a petty crime, which I don't think is help. That does not help. When you raise the attention level of it, that helps. And then secondly, the technology. The technology which we are going to be developing citywide over the next year, I anticipate, will help a lot, so that the person who we saw their signature graffiti on 40 separate pillars, roughly speaking, that image could then be put into a technology base, pulled up, and identified like a signature, and that would really help. And that's something that's coming as part of what we talked about.
I'm funding that in the Topanga station, so I think it's like $60,000 or something, but it's worth it.
That's critical.
Okay, good, thanks.
By the way, is there anyone here from Councilmember Perry's office that would like to speak briefly on this?
Good morning, Stephanie Magnian from the Office of Councilwoman Perry's office. Just ask that you forward this request to the City Attorney's office so that we can work towards getting that hydrofluoric acid behind the counter. It's a very expensive material to abate once it's been etched onto a window. It's not like a wall where it can be painted over. If the business has not taken the initiative in putting a coating on, it can only be sanded down so many times before the entire window needs to be replaced, and it's very expensive to
Thank you.
take care of.
Well, if we could have a motion before we lose our quorum, a motion and a second to approve these items. So that has been done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to go to council? John White, City Clerk. Clarification on items 5 and 6. You can hold the items in committee pending a report back from the city attorney, or you can forward them to council with a more formal request to the city attorney to report back.
Well,
What's the
no,
committee's
what I was going to ask the committee is that if number 5 could get forwarded on to the council so that the council could make the request to our office to draft an ordinance, because it doesn't sound like that particular one needs a report back. And number 6, it sounds like the committee does want a report from the CLA, from the LAPD, and the city attorney before any specific request for an ordinance is made. So
That was the
does
motion.
that was the motion? Okay.
That was the motion.
So 6 is a
So it's
report back?
clarified.
So 5 will go to council with approval, and 6 will be held in committee for the report back. Item 7, motion and Rule 9 directing the police department to institute an award and medal to honor officers injured in the line of duty, similar to the Purple Heart Medal awarded by the military.
Good morning. My name is Jim Kanzler. I'm the Commanding Officer Personnel Group and also the Chair of the Commendations Board. And on May 5th, 2009, the Board of Police Commissioners approved of the Los Angeles Police Department Purple Heart. And in essence, as a result of the motion by Councilwoman Gruhl and Zine, we worked on this, myself, my staff, along with Police Commissioners Alan Scobin and Anthony Pacheco and his staff. And as I said, on May 5th, 2009, the LAPD Purple Heart was established. And in essence, is officers who have suffered a traumatic physical injury in a tactical situation would get the LAPD Purple Heart. And we also put a retroactivity clause in there that officers who were killed in the line of duty, their family could request the awarding of the LAPD Purple Heart posthumously, and also officers who have been suffered physical traumatic injury prior to this May 5th, 2009, and our active employees could submit their CO, their commanding officer could submit documents to the board so they could be awarded the LAPD Purple Heart. You have any questions?
Any questions?
Do you have to bleed to get it, or like?
What's that now?
Do you have to have blood to get it, like the military, or?
A little bit.
A little bit?
A little bit.
Just the bang on the head and going to the hospital doesn't count?
It doesn't count. We've had a couple of those requests. Trust me, we've had a
All right.
couple of those requests.
I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one speaker from the public on this item, Monica Harmon.
Good morning. As you all know, well, welcome. Paul,
you.
congratulations on your appointment. Nice to see you in this committee. As a big supporter of LAPD, I think this is such a great, memento for the officers that get hurt. I work a lot with Hollenbeck Division, and we had, within a six or 7 month period, 2 officers really seriously hurt. Officer Salazar, who responded to a search warrant and was just brutally run over by the suspect, broke his legs, his pelvis. Thank God he's back to work. That's dedication. Then we had Officer Tuck. Him and his partner responded to a call, and right as they were exiting their vehicle, were fired upon AK-47, a suspect. His entire hand almost came off. He's back at work. We had officer last year, Hanabusa, another search warrant, shot in the leg. Bullet hit his helmet. Thank God he had it, and he's fine. I mean, but these are the officers that are putting their lives at risk for us to be safe. And what's really so great about this is that the only time people really understand and know the gravity of what they do is when the funerals come up. And people talk all these nice things at their funerals, and they're not there to hear it. So this is just a wonderful thing. As a community member, active citywide, we thank you for this, and this is, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the proper motion would be to instruct the LAPD to report back with criteria used to determine when a medal would be given to honor officers injured in the line of duty. And if we could have that motion?
That's been identified in the special order, and what I could do is I could provide the committee a copy of the order, if that's correct, because that was the thrust of what the committee worked on, was ensuring that there was a criteria high enough that bump on the head, or as one person called, he fell off his chair and hurt his back trying to file something, would not be considered part of the LAPD Purple Heart Award.
So you have that criteria already
Yes.
finalized?
Yes.
We could have, maybe move to have the chair send it to the council with recommendation for approval and have the department present that at the council.
Okay.
I'll second that. That would be perfect. And I guess if we have no other business, we'll thank you for the presentation, and I guess we are adjourned.
Jim, you gotta give me that medal, man.